So good morning and welcome to all of you. My name is Patty Dietrich, and I'm the president of the Public School Boards Association of Alberta. We're very pleased to welcome you to our 2013 Spring General Assembly, a celebration of public school education in Alberta. I'm pleased this morning to introduce and welcome our two instructional leaders who are going to be working with us this weekend. Dr. Fred Renihan has enjoyed a varied and challenging career in the world of education. He was a teacher, principal, director of education, executive director of curriculum and instruction, and assistant deputy minister during a 26-year term in the province of Saskatchewan. He was appointed as dean in the Faculty of Education at Brandon University in Manitoba in 1992, and CEO Superintendent of the Surrey School District in BC from 1995 to 2005. From 2005, he taught in the graduate program in educational leadership at Simon Fraser University. Fred is frequently called upon to consult with educational policymakers and to speak on matters related to educational reform, school and district leadership, change management, and educational governance. He has received awards for distinguished service in each of the provinces in which he has served. He has written and presented widely in the areas of educational reform, often with his brother Patrick. He lives in South Surrey with his wife Marianne. They have two grown children, Sean and Kathleen, both who live and work in Vancouver. Next, we have Dr. Pat Renihan. He's currently professor and director of the Saskatchewan Educational Leadership Unit. He served as head of the Department of Educational Administration, University of Saskatchewan, for the past 10 years. He studied at the University of London and the University of Saskatchewan prior to completing his PhD in 1977 at the University of Alberta. Pat's teaching areas are organizational theory, school renewal, instructional leadership, and research methods. He writes and researches in the areas of school effectiveness, instructional supervision, parental engagement, leadership, and school principalship, and has also presented and consulted on related topics with groups of educators and policymakers in North America, New Zealand, China, and Europe. Pat has served in various teaching and administrative capacities in the educational system, and he's also served for 9 years as a school trustee. Please join me in a very warm PSBA welcome to Dr. Fred and Dr. Pat.
Thank you. Come down. Come down. This is very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
That was good. Well, that concludes our presentation today. There's a discipline problem.
That's all right.
Right there.
I talked to those people before. It's like going to church. They all start from the back. You're our heroes.
Yes.
Yeah. Amazing.
Now, when you talk about trusteeship, I had 3 terms in Saskatoon. And every time I ran, I came in with the least amount of votes. So the rest of the board used to call me Landslide Renihan. But it was good. A great experience, a great learning experience as a trustee. And congratulations to all of you for taking on that role. And reading the materials that you've got, that inspiring education, the discussion last night, you're a pretty special group. You've, I think, raised the bar of the trustee in the trusteeship and in governance in Alberta, and that is really very evident in the way in which you guys interact. So congratulations, it's really excellent. We always start with a wee bit of a limerick, and so we might as well. Fred and I are from Ireland, from Limerick in Ireland. We are from the city of Limerick, and so people always ask us if we know a limerick or two, and we do. We know clean ones too.
We know limericks
amazing.
that are fit to be told in public. Like there's the one about there was a young man from Bengal who went to a fancy dress ball. He said he would risk it and go as a biscuit, but a dog ate him up in the hall.
And there's the limerick about the poet. There once was a poet from Iran whose lines they never could scan. When they said that the swing never went with the thing, he said, well, generally what I try to do when I write poetry like this is to try my very, very best to get as many words in the last line as I possibly can. So there has to be a bit of creativity involved in limericks. Have you stolen the thing?
Yes.
Click it.
I did.
This is Fred's dissertation. Give me that, you fool. Yeah, now, Fred's dissertation, actually, on conflict as bargaining as conflict, he won the Canadian Best Dissertation Award way back in 1920 when he. And this is his first. This is the first chapter. This is the standard organizational chart. You know how do we look?
But you know,
and he says, yeah,
it depends where you
That's
are.
This is the reality.
How you want to look at organizations depends on where you are in the organization. So you start to look.
This is the University of Saskatchewan organizational chart. So you see the president up there in goal. And teachers' perception organizational chart. So it depends who you ask in the organization. That's the teachers. So, okay. This is the principal's perception organizational chart. And the feminist organizational chart. So you've got all different kinds. The Irish organizational chart. you got to take. And of course, the Ministry of Education for Alberta organizational chart. That's what it's all about, isn't it? But no, I love the relationship that you have here with your different groups. So today, we've really got a very short timeline, and we're going to move through some material with you fairly fast. You've all got copies now that are being sent to you of the slides. Use them whatever way you like. Don't worry about asking us for permission or anything like that. That's your material, and use it. And we took a long time to put that together with serious troubling from Dick. He really was he was on our case for the whole of the last year in putting this together. He marked our work regularly. But so to increase an understanding of the current environment, what are you doing, Fred? You're going to say something?
No.
Say something, Fred.
No.
Say something clever, Fred.
To celebrate the accomplishments of the 2010 to 13 term of office, and it's nice to know that you're going to have a 4-year term next time. I wish that was the case in BC, because I hated the time when it came for elections. But in BC, the boards are politicking all the time anyway. So it doesn't really matter much, whether we have elections or not. They just do it. And they're very political in BC. And very often, the boards fight with one another at the board table in public. So it makes the job of superintendent as referee very difficult.
Yeah, that's it. So moving on, the assembly outcomes, an appreciation of the contribution trustees make to the education of students. And you've got the best interests of the child is there. That's the common denominator. And the positive impact boards have on community life. And time, Fred, again, during the course of the next day or so, are going to be hitting that whole notion of the positive, building on the positive, looking at our positive core. And what is it about this whole job of the trusteeship that makes us want to come out time and time again
so when we talk about relationships, one of the interesting points that I noted in the talk that was given yesterday by the designate for the Minister of Education talked about some things that for me were really in a way, inspiring. The idea of inspiring education, the idea of looking at new ways to do things. But most of all, it's the collaborative way in which this happens. In BC, where I come from, teachers don't talk to administrators very much. The boards don't talk to teachers. And teachers square off very frequently against their boards in public, particularly at election time. Yeah. The ministry, well, we're over-regulated in terms of what it is that happens. So that brings a sort of burden and a difficult kind of way to work.
It's like the 3 lies that administrators tell. Number 1, I have a few brief comments to make. Number 2, things were different when I went to school. Number 3, I'm from the government and I'm here to help.
Hey, come on now.
Anyway, just a couple of things here in terms of time. We need to move ahead during the course of the day, so forgive us, but we're going to just put a few ground rules
All right,
out
we
there
talked
for you.
with the facilitators this morning. We asked them to be conscious of some things.
Yeah.
Be conscious of the time allocated, stay on task and on topic. Move to table talk sessions expeditiously.
We'll be
that means
following
quickly.
you.
All right? Just in case you didn't know that. Avoid sidebar discussions no matter how juicy the topic.
The gossip. Appoint a recorder for each table talk session. Pass table talk notes to the facilitator at the end of each session. What we would like to do, and Dick will collect all of these in, all of your deliberations, and then we will have that as a package for you for the product of the entire discussions, and that's valuable.
Appoint a spokesperson for the group who may be called upon to report to the General Assembly. We will be asking after the table talk, when we reconvene, for a couple of tables to report out.
Randomly.
During the course of the session,
Right.
all of you will be asked to report out.
And then finally, when reporting, resist the temptation to repeat what has already been said, even if you're a board chair. You cannot repeat what has been said. Okay,
that was Pat's idea, it wasn't mine.
So, excellence in governance. What are we about here? We want to make that point. The notion of uniqueness, the notion of one size does not fit all, celebrating our differences, and the implications as we're talking about it was supposed to be the ministry. It's the ministry message from last night. So effective boards. And very quickly, we'll race through these, but there are some critical issues that we want to emphasize as we're doing so. They focus on student achievement, and it's that notion, the best interests of the child. Allocate resources to needs, looking at budgets as viewed as tools to increase student learning.
Watch return on investment. There's regular measurement and reporting of results. I mean, that is important stuff. One of the things that Pat and I are really conscious of in terms of teaching and learning, and it's a simple construct, that in order for kids to learn, 2 conditions have to be maintained. The first is membership, that every student has to feel secure in the environment, safe in the environment, valued in the environment for who they are, and that it is a celebration of their contribution that is honored every single day.
And secondly, they're engaged. They're engaged in the academic work of the school. And so some students tend to be more into belonging and membership. My son was. He was a smoker. That was the belonging. It was his peer group. And he still smokes. We can't get him out. Even though his mum sends him little things from the newspaper, kind of where research that relates smoking to impotence and all of that. And it has not worked, one iota, but that's the nature of the thing. And they engage, effective boards engage the communities that they serve. And that part of the whole thing is critical as well.
So governance strives to balance three values as far as we're concerned. Leadership, the demand for coordination to ensure effective and efficient delivery of programs and services to the public. Competence, the demand that decisions be based on technically meritorious considerations. In other words, that we have data that we use to make intelligent decisions, and we do that collaboratively.
And representative democracy, that's what we're into. The demand that those elected or appointed act in the interests of those that they represent in a responsible manner. And that's the accountability piece. All of this is really, we're talking accountability. Your son could be a school trustee if he doesn't start applying himself.
This was in the paper.
This from BC, isn't it?
Surrey School Board were very much in the press. And that was in the paper after one of our, sort of brouhahas. So I took it and I put it in the trustees' lounge. And the chair of the board said, "Can you believe that somebody would do that?" I was saying, I can't understand it myself. I think they knew who did it.
And from last night, inspiring the vision here, the engaged thinker, the ethical citizen, the entrepreneurial spirit, and those three. And so looking at the guideposts, what are the broad, big issue qualities that we're looking at? And the core values of opportunity and fairness and citizenship. And it's always having those in the background guiding what we're doing. And every now and then doing the double check around how we work as a board.
We are kind of excited about the document, Inspiring
Really
Learning.
well framed.
It is so upbeat.
Engaging.
It is so forward-looking. And I hope that all of the things that have to go together to make it possible, like releasing power, authority, influence to boards, instead of regulating and over-regulating what it is that boards will do.
So then when you take last night and you're taking what was said, and you're taking that inspiring education, how do you look at your own work with that backdrop, which is fabulous? It's the notion of broad representation of stakeholders to participate in governance, flexibility and discretion at the local level. And you're seeing more of that now through the Education Act. And that's more empowering than the model that we're seeing in Saskatchewan and elsewhere, which seems to be going the other way. And micromanagement rather than freeing decisions for being made at the local level. Accountability for learning excellence should be clear. And that from that whole accountability chain, from learners being accountable for their own education, and educators, leaders, funders, and the community. And it's that question that we'll be asking you later on today. What are we accountable for? Who are we accountable to? And it's asking and responding to those kinds of questions.
Absolutely.
And then the effectiveness, and we'll come back to that a little bit later. The governance styles around consensus building, but occasionally there's that tendency to kind of get into response to factions there and to the individuals who are making most noise in the community.
So we looked at, and we will be talking about this when we come back to your fall conference to talk with the new trustees and the experienced trustees. I didn't say old trustees.
No, we call them new trustees and used trustees.
And then, of course, there are the abused trustees.
And then, again, the indicators of excellence there. What is good governance? How does that guide what we're doing as a board every now and then?
There they are. Participation. Are we, as a board, as trustees, informed and organized? This is a rhetorical question. You don't have to answer this, okay? Reliability, predictability, and rule of law, that there's technical managerial competence, fair legal frameworks, and enforced impartiality. Transparency. Decisions are made in accordance with rules and subject to scrutiny, and they're made in the open, not in camera. The more that is open and the fewer things that are in camera is a sign of a board that's really clicking on all cylinders.
And equity and inclusiveness, even the most vulnerable within our communities. And we'll pose the question to you later on. What groups are on the periphery in our system? And we ask that of principals. What groups are on the periphery of your decision-making within the school? Those parents that you can't get out there, how they don't come out. How do you get to them? How do you reach out? How do you involve the non-traditional groups, the newcomers? And within an increasingly diverse community, those are very, very critical questions.
So, yeah, that whole issue, go back to the
I
slide.
can't. All right.
You certainly can. He does that to me all the time. Equity and inclusiveness. This is a discussion which we had last night in the bar. Actually, it was perfect. I thought to myself, this is a really, really good discussion, because we were talking about what does inclusiveness look like, and what does equity look like. And somebody said, a bright trustee said, you know, that nothing is more unequal than the equal treatment of unequals. Whoa! And so that when we're looking at how we allocate scarce resources, which is what policy making is, how do we do that? I know that when I went to Surrey first, you know, our budget is $500 million. You know, an amazing amount of money. I used to have nightmares about losing it, losing several millions. And then I figured out that I didn't actually have to worry about, I only had to worry about 8% of that, because everything else was in salaries. 92%, and that's the danger point. That is really dangerous stuff when you've got that much money in costs you can't control. So I stopped worrying about the 92% and started to worry about the other. But what happened was that we got money from the ministry. It's all direct grants, right? Some of it is earmarked and some conditional, and some is unconditional. But when I asked the board, how do we allocate the resources? They say, well, the ministry give us the money. The money follows the child, elementary, middle, senior, and then we distribute it accordingly. I'm saying, that doesn't make that much sense in Surrey. I mean, because they're not, we have about 5 schools in the North End where the transiency rate in the schools is about 150% in a year. In other words, that's how much it changes. And no parent of a child in the school, in those 5 schools, owns their own home. Not one. So what are you going to, how are those kids, we have kids down near where I live, in South Surrey. I can see White Rock from there. The homes in some of the schools start at around $2 million. So when parents are asked to contribute, they say, how many labs do you need? Well, the North End, they have to go to the pub and convince the guy to have a raffle so they can get a computer. That's the way of it. Now, what is wrong with that picture?
And the other thing is the whole basic question of who are the most important people in the school? And naturally, we say kids. But it's interesting, in Fred's system, their growth was so phenomenal and so rapid that they had portable cities in many of the schools. And it was very interesting that if you ask teachers, who are the most important people in the school? Kids. But the teachers negotiated successfully that they should not or will not teach in a portable for more than 2 consecutive years. which then kids could spend their lives, entire lives in a portable.
So
The teachers
it's a
know
question of
in
sort of
that
values,
context.
asking those kinds of questions, you know, so
Whoops.
that we could do that. What's he doing now?
There. And it's then moving on the 5. This was a piece of research was on why schools and how schools do not meet standards. And what Fred and I have done in a wee bit of positive, appreciative inquiry is to turn it around a little bit. So they're visible. They provide visible, effective leadership. They provide strong governance.
There are high standards of teaching.
System-wide.
There are consistent external support, and they have the ability to adapt to challenging circumstances. Later on, we're going to show you a slide which says simply this: internal accountability always precedes external accountability in schools that are going to improve. Now, this is an interesting kind of case, because in the United States, in BC, we have external accountability. And the teachers hate it for a very good reason. By insisting that we have standardized tests, and we're going to have every kid in grades 3, 7, and 10 take these tests, and there's no input from the professional staff. What the ministry are actually doing, what government is actually doing, is robbing teachers of their professional integrity, of their need to be able to do their work, their professional work, to teach and to design, that it's thrust upon them. If it was the other way around, let them, sort of, and encouraging them and scaffold them in terms of good, what we call assessment measures, assessment for learning instead of learning.
And we're going to spend a wee bit of time on that later on. And then district leadership, the seeing to the investments here. And we're very much into that business. But it's this whole notion of capital, the broader concepts of intellectual capital, the knowledge and skills of those who work with leaders. How do we build that? How do we nurture that
and how do we nurture the social capital? This is really the membership stuff. I mean, membership has to come first. Nobody can learn if they're insecure in their environment, if they don't feel safe or they don't feel valued. They will not learn. And we know that.
And so apart from purely the financial capital, there's the spiritual and across schools. And how does that find expression, that notion of moral purpose, and how do we deal with that? Those are big picture concepts that need to be kept in the forefront.
Okay, Patrick, we are now running late.
Right.
It wasn't our fault.
Have a look
we started
at that.
late. It was Paddy's fault.
But it was a lovely introduction. I thought it was good. I think that was lovely. Thank you.
So we're actually running late. And I'm not going to perseverate over this for the next 10 minutes. I'm just going to say this first session is now over.